What happens when your body gives up on you, before your mind ever does? That was the question echoing in Jack Reynolds' mind the moment he hit the cold tile floor. It was a Tuesday morning. A quiet, ordinary Tuesday. The kind where the birds chirp politely, and the sun slips in through the blinds just enough to warm the hardwood. Jack had just poured himself a cup of coffee, black, no sugar, same way for the last 30 years. But this time, something was off. He stood up from the kitchen table and felt a strange heaviness in his legs. Not the usual stiffness. This was deeper, like his bones had forgotten how to hold him. He took a step. Then another. Then nothing. His body folded in on itself. Knees hit tile. Then shoulder. Then cheek. No pain. Just shock. And silence. The mug shattered beside him. Coffee pooled under his elbow, seeping into the fibers of his old flannel robe. He stared at the ceiling, blinking. Listening. No footsteps. No voice asking, "Are you okay?" Because no one was there. Hit subscribe and comment where you're watching from. A voice chimed in from the TV in the background, still playing a YouTube video Jack had started earlier about electric trucks. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jack laughed, just a small exhale of disbelief. Push me forward. Hell, I can't even stand up. That moment, right there, was the beginning. Not of a tragedy. But of something else. Something harder to define, but infinitely more powerful. Jack Reynolds had always been the strong one. Built like an old oak tree, with hands that told stories just by their scars. He was 64. Retired, technically. A former mechanical engineer who helped design battery casings for one of the early Tesla prototypes. Back in the day, he'd bench press more than half the younger guys at the plant gym. He wasn't a man used to weakness. And he sure as hell wasn't used to lying on the floor, wondering if he had a medical alert button anywhere nearby. But pride's a funny thing. It'll keep you on the floor longer than necessary. Make you crawl instead of crawl. Make you laugh off the worst moments like they're nothing. So that's what Jack did. He rolled himself to the counter. Pulled himself up with shaking arms. And stood, sweating, panting, furious at his own muscles for betraying him. Later that day, the doctor would use words that Jack hadn't heard before, at least not personally. Sarcopenia, she said. It's age-related muscle loss. It's common after 60. You're not dying, Mr. Reynolds. But you are declining. Slowly. Invisibly. Declining. That word hit harder than the fall. She kept talking, about protein intake, resistance training, some newer studies on longevity. Jack only half listened. All he could think about was that damn coffee mug, still shattered on his kitchen floor. That night, Jack sat in his recliner and stared at the ceiling. The same way he had earlier that morning, except now, the room was darker, quieter. And he couldn't shake one thought. What if this is it? What if I've already peaked? He picked up his phone and mindlessly scrolled. Stocks. News. Weather. Then something caught his eye. A live stream from Elon Musk. It wasn't about cars or Mars. It was a panel on health and longevity for older adults, something Tesla was researching internally for employee wellness programs. Jack almost kept scrolling. But then Elon said something that made his thumb freeze midair. Muscle strength equals independence. If you can't get off the floor, you're not free. Jack replayed it. Muscle strength equals independence. It was like someone had aimed a spotlight straight into the corner of his mind he was trying to ignore. He clicked the video open, eyes locked in. Musk wasn't preaching. He was talking, plain, direct, unfiltered. Like a man who knew time was limited, and strength was everything. He even listed foods. There are 3 I never skip. Especially now that I'm past 50, he said. They're simple. Accessible. But they matter. Jack grabbed a notebook. Started writing. 1. Eggs. 2. Spinach. 3. Olive oil. Simple. Accessible. And apparently, transformative. Jack scoffed at first. Is he serious? Eggs? But that voice in his head wouldn't let go. If you can't get off the floor, you're not free. Jack stood up, slowly this time. Stiff knees. Sore pride. He walked to the fridge, opened it, and looked inside. 1 half-empty carton of eggs. 1 nearly expired bag of spinach. A dusty bottle of olive oil in the pantry. That's all it took. Not a miracle. Not a supplement. Just a nudge. A whisper of hope inside a storm of frustration. And that's where the story begins. A man on the edge of giving up. A floor that felt like rock bottom. And a billionaire's unexpected advice lighting the first spark. Because when you're over 60, and your body starts to fail you, what matters isn't just what you used to be. It's what you still can become. Before the fall, before the fear, before the live stream from Elon Musk, Jack Reynolds was the guy you'd ask to lift the heavy stuff. Not because he offered. But because you knew he could. Back then, strength was his signature. Not the flashy, gym bro kind with tank tops and protein shakers. No, Jack's strength was practical. Lived in. Earned. He was the guy who changed his own oil well into his 50s, who carried 3 grocery bags in each hand just to prove a point, who never once hired a moving truck because, in his words, why pay someone to do what my back's been training for all these years? But those days, felt like someone else's now. Jack grew up in Dayton, Ohio, the son of a factory worker and a schoolteacher. His father, Clyde, worked steel, molten, hot, punishing steel. The kind of job that made men out of boys before their voices even dropped, Clyde used to say. Jack idolized him. Not because Clyde was warm. He wasn't. But because Clyde stood like a monument, unshakable. Even when he was quiet, his presence filled a room like gravity. By the time Jack was 14, he was already at the plant during summers, sweeping floors, helping load crates. Just being near his dad felt like stepping into some ancient guild. And yet, Jack was different. He had a brain for mechanics. While other boys were obsessed with muscle cars or football stats, Jack was taking apart his mom's blender just to see how it worked, and putting it back together better than before. By 22, he had a degree in mechanical engineering. By 25, he was designing industrial parts for a big firm outside Detroit. And by 33, he was recruited by an upstart company in California with a wild idea about electric cars. Tesla. When Jack first met Elon Musk, it wasn't in a boardroom. It was in the back of a dusty prototype garage. Elon was holding a torque wrench, looking every bit as intense and awkward as you'd expect. He turned to Jack and said, "You ever hold the future in your hands? Because we're about to build it." Jack didn't say much. Just nodded. Then got to work. That was Jack's way. No spotlight. Just steel and sweat. He didn't care about stocks or tweets or internet fame. What mattered to Jack was function. Did the car run better because of his design? Did the battery last longer? Could it survive the heat, the cold, the road? Jack worked on the early Roadster. Then the Model S. His fingerprints, literally and figuratively, were in some of the most famous EVs on Earth. He could have climbed higher, gone corporate, sat behind glass. But Jack stayed on the floor. Among machines. Among bolts. Among blueprints smudged with oil and ambition. Because that's where he felt most alive. He married Margaret at 35. She was a nurse, sharp, kind, no nonsense. They met at a hardware store. She was trying to replace a showerhead. He gave her unsolicited advice. She called him cocky. He offered to fix it. She said no. He left his number anyway. She didn't call for 2 weeks. Then one day, she did. Margaret grounded Jack. Where he was steel, she was silk. Where he was stubborn, she was strategic. She reminded him to stretch, to eat something green once in a while, to stop reading blueprints at 2 a.m. They had one child, Emma. She inherited Jack's brain and Margaret's fire. Now in her 30s, Emma works as a product manager at Tesla, living the kind of life Jack always hoped for her, bold, busy, brilliant. But when Margaret passed away from breast cancer 3 years ago, everything changed. Jack didn't collapse. He just slowed. The gym stopped being a habit. Eggs became cereal. Walks turned into naps. And the workshop in the garage stayed closed. He told Emma he was fine. That retirement suited him. That he was enjoying peace and quiet. But inside, something hollowed out. The house was quieter than he could handle. The mornings, longer. The nights, heavier. And through all of it, one truth whispered beneath the surface. Jack Reynolds, the man who once bent steel, carried engines, and helped build electric history, was fading. Not in a dramatic, movie scene way. But slowly. Invisibly. Exactly the way sarcopenia works. That's what made the fall in Chapter 1 so cruel. It wasn't just a stumble. It was confirmation of something he'd been trying to deny. That the strength he once carried like a birthright had quietly walked out the door. And no one noticed. Not even him. But something changed when Elon said, muscle strength equals independence. Not because it was profound. But because it came from someone Jack once stood shoulder to shoulder with, someone who knew what it meant to build something from nothing. And if Jack had built a legacy from steel and wires, maybe, just maybe, he could rebuild his body from food and fire. Next up. Eggs. And memories he thought he buried along with his appetite. Because in Chapter 3, we'll see how something as simple as breakfast becomes a battlefield between past and present, and how healing can begin in the most unexpected places. Jack Reynolds had never been afraid of silence. He grew up with it. In the steel plant, silence meant the machines were off, and the danger was gone. At home, silence was his father's love language, stern glances, nods across the dinner table, the kind of approval you had to earn through action, not words. But this kind of silence. This thick, stretching, endless quiet that sat heavy in every corner of his home. This silence terrified him. That night, after the fall and the doctor's visit, Jack stood in the center of his living room like a man who had just walked into someone else's house. Everything looked the same. The oak bookshelves he built himself. The leather recliner Margaret always claimed was hers, even though he paid for it. The TV that still had Netflix open to a show he never finished. But it felt different. Colder. Emptier. Like the house knew he was weaker now. Like it had finally caught on that Margaret wasn't coming back to fill the space with her voice, her cooking, her humming. He walked to the fireplace mantel. Dust lined the edge like a thin layer of forgotten time. He picked up a framed photo, him, Margaret, and Emma, taken on their last trip to Lake Tahoe. Margaret was wearing that wide-brimmed hat he always teased her about. Emma had her arms thrown around both of them, cheeks pink from the wind. Jack stared at the picture, willing it to give him something. A spark. A sign. A reason. But all it gave him was more silence. He wandered into the kitchen and opened the fridge. Eggs. 6 of them, left in the back of the carton, cold and unimpressed. He remembered Elon's words, I never skip them. Especially now. He hadn't eaten eggs since Margaret passed. She used to make them every Sunday, scrambled, soft, with chives and a little bit of cheese. He'd pretend to grumble about it being the same thing every week, but secretly, he loved it. Now, the idea of cooking eggs felt weird. Too intimate. Like he'd be borrowing from her ritual, performing it without permission. Still, he pulled out the carton. Set two on the counter. Opened a pan. He stared at it. Hell, what now? He muttered. Everything felt like a first step through molasses. He reached for the oil, poured too much. Cracked an egg, half the shell went in. Got it out with a spoon. Turned the heat too high. Burned the edge. By the time the eggs were on a plate, they looked more like regret than breakfast. He sat down anyway. Forked a bite. Chewed. It was dry. Overcooked. Barely seasoned. But it tasted like something he hadn't felt in a long time. Effort. The house creaked in the way old homes do at night, when every sound seems amplified. The wind brushed against the windows. The floor popped under his chair. The heating clicked on with a low groan. Jack looked around. The silence wasn't just in the air. It was in him. And it had been growing for years. After Margaret died, people had reached out. At first. Calls. Texts. Cards. Emma came by every weekend. Neighbors brought food. One of the guys from work invited him to the golf course. But Jack always declined. Said he was fine. Said he was resting. Said he needed space. Eventually, the calls stopped. Emma moved back to Palo Alto full-time. The neighbors returned to their routines. The invitations faded away. And Jack? He leaned into the quiet. Made it a habit. A shield. What he didn't realize then was that isolation doesn't feel like punishment until it becomes your only company. That night, after finishing the last dry bite of egg, Jack turned on the TV but didn't really watch it. He found himself scrolling his phone again. Searching for that Musk video. Found it. Rewatched the part he scribbled down. If you can't get off the floor, you're not free. There are 3 foods I always keep in my rotation after 50, eggs, spinach, and olive oil. Simple. Effective. Underrated. He paused the screen. Let Elon's face freeze mid-sentence. It was surreal, really. That this man, this billionaire, this internet meme, this rocket-launching enigma, was now the unlikely voice pulling Jack out of the fog. But desperation does funny things to a man's pride. And in that moment, Jack didn't care if the advice came from Elon Musk or a cereal box cartoon. He just needed something to hold on to. Before bed, he pulled out a small notebook from the junk drawer. It had a Tesla logo on it, swag from some retirement party they threw him 2 years ago. He flipped to the first page and wrote in big, messy letters. Day 1. Below that. Eggs, burned, dry, but edible. Walked to the mailbox. Didn't fall. He stared at the page. Laughed softly. Then added. Tomorrow, try not to suck at cooking. He crawled into bed and stared at the ceiling again. The silence was still there. But now, it didn't feel quite so final. Jack didn't like doctors. Not because he was afraid of them. Because he didn't trust them to tell him anything he didn't already know. He was old school, if it's broken, you'll feel it. If you don't feel it, it's fine. That motto had served him well through busted knuckles, bruised ribs, and one particularly memorable incident involving a circular saw and a very bad decision. But this wasn't about pain. This was about absence. The absence of strength. The absence of certainty. The quiet, creeping subtraction of ability that had gone unnoticed, until he was on the kitchen floor, staring up at a ceiling fan that hadn't moved in months. Mr. Reynolds, the doctor said, tapping away on her tablet, your blood work came back fine. Heart looks good. No sign of stroke. But. Jack hated that word. She turned the screen toward him. Charts. Graphs. Numbers that meant nothing to him. What we're looking at here is age-related muscle loss, sarcopenia. Sarco, what? Sarcopenia, she repeated. It's Greek. Sarx means flesh. Penia means loss. Loss of muscle tissue due to aging. Jack raised an eyebrow. So, you're telling me I'm getting old? She smiled, kind but firm. I'm telling you your muscles are shrinking. Quietly. Consistently. And that's not something you can ignore forever. He leaned back in the chair. Crossed his arms. Thought that was just part of life. It is. But it's also something we can slow down, maybe even reverse, if we catch it early enough. Jack stayed quiet. She pulled up another chart. This one simpler, a silhouette of a man over decades. At 30, thick and defined. By 60, noticeably thinner. By 70, fragile. Sarcopenia typically begins in your 30s. By the time you're 60, you've already lost up to 15% of your muscle mass. After 70, it accelerates. Jack stared at the image. It wasn't some horror show. It was subtle. Almost artistic. But it hit like a freight train. So what, you're saying I'm melting? In a way, yes. He rubbed his hands together, calloused palms against each other. And you're sure this isn't just because I've been taking it easy? I'm sure that didn't help. She didn't say it with judgment. Just truth. Then came the real gut punch. If you don't intervene, you could lose 3 to 5% of your muscle mass every decade from here on out. That means increased fall risk, reduced mobility, slower healing, higher chance of hospitalization. Jack cut in. You mean, nursing home? She didn't flinch. Eventually, yes. If nothing changes. That hit harder than any diagnosis. Because Jack didn't fear death. He feared dependence. He saw what it did to his father, who once crushed steel beams with his hands and ended up in a recliner, unable to button his own shirt. Jack had sworn he'd never go out like that. What do I do? He asked, voice quieter than usual. Start moving. Resistance training. Daily walking. Protein intake. Vitamin D. And, yes, certain foods that help fight inflammation and rebuild lost tissue. She handed him a brochure. These are evidence-based steps. You follow this, we do follow-ups every 6 weeks. Jack looked at the list. Eggs. Spinach. Olive oil. Beans. Tuna. Resistance bands. Journaling. Funny, he said. Some billionaire told me the same thing last night. She raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? Elon Musk, Jack said with a half-smile. I watched one of his live streams. He said, muscle strength equals independence. The doctor leaned forward. Smart man. He's not wrong. They finished the appointment with scheduling and small talk, but Jack wasn't fully there. His mind kept flashing back to the image of that slowly shrinking man. He didn't want to be a cautionary tale. He wanted to be one of the rare ones who aged differently. Who fought back. As he left the clinic, a light breeze passed through the parking lot. He stopped for a moment, looking at the sun, squinting. His arms felt smaller now, not because they were, but because he knew. Awareness changes everything. But there was also something else, something quietly rising. A fire. Small. Flickering. But real. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his notebook, and scribbled. Day 2. Doctor confirmed, sarcopenia. First win, I asked for help. New goal, defy the chart. Then he added one more line, circling it twice. If strength equals freedom, then every rep is a rebellion. Back home, Jack stood in front of the mirror shirtless for the first time in months. His shoulders sloped. His arms had softened. His chest, once proud and squared, now sagged slightly. But in his eyes, that old fire was coming back. Maybe, just maybe, there was still time. Time to push back. To rise again. To build something new, not from metal, but from will. The house was dark again. But tonight, Jack wasn't listening to the silence. He was ignoring it. He sat at the kitchen table with his old MacBook Air humming faintly in front of him. A half-drunk cup of green tea, Margaret's old habit, he was trying, sat beside a yellow legal pad scribbled with half-readable notes. Across the screen. Muscle health and longevity in the post-60 population, Tesla Employee Wellness Initiative, internal memo leaked. It was 2:17 a.m. Jack hadn't planned on staying up late, but after his doctor visit, something inside him had shifted, clicked back into place. That engineer brain of his, the one that used to tinker and solve and build, was back online. And now, he wasn't just fighting muscle loss. He was researching like his life depended on it. Because maybe it did. He had started by Googling Musk muscle food. Which led to a podcast. Then a Reddit thread. Then a Medium post with questionable grammar but interesting sources. And eventually, a link to a leaked internal Tesla document, allegedly shared with employees over 55 in a closed corporate health pilot. He clicked it. And that's when everything got weird. Internal memo, preventing age-related decline, the 3 Musk foods. The title alone sounded like clickbait. But Jack kept reading. The memo, supposedly prepared by Tesla's Internal Wellness Task Force with input from SpaceX's Aerospace Physiology team, because of course Elon would cross-pollinate everything, listed 3 key nutrients Musk himself had reportedly emphasized. 1. Choline, found in eggs. 2. Nitrate-rich greens, like spinach. 3. Oleic acid, from high-quality olive oil. The report broke it down with clinical precision. Choline protects against cognitive decline and helps muscle contraction. Most Americans over 60 are deficient. Nitrate-rich greens improve blood flow and oxygen delivery to muscles, boosting strength and endurance in seniors. Oleic acid helps fight sarcopenia through anti-inflammatory processes and supports cellular regeneration. Jack blinked at the screen. This wasn't some TikTok diet. This was science. Data. Elon-level planning. And it was working, or so the memo claimed. A handful of senior engineers in the pilot group had improved strength, blood pressure, and even reaction time metrics in under 12 weeks. Jack scribbled across the yellow pad. Eggs equals choline equals mind plus muscle. Spinach equals nitrates equals blood flow. Olive oil equals regeneration plus strength. It felt too simple. Like a joke. But simplicity wasn't the enemy. Inconsistency was. He scrolled further. At the bottom of the memo, one line stood out, bold, all caps. Slow decay is still decay. Fight it. Every day you wait is a day you weaken. Jack stared at that sentence like it was carved in stone. It hit him harder than the doctor's charts, harder than the fall, harder than any stat could. Because deep down, he knew it was true. Margaret had always told him, you don't just age, you drift toward dying. Unless you swim. This was his swim. By the time the sun peeked over the neighborhood rooftops, Jack had a list taped to his fridge. The Musk 3. White heavy checkmark 2 eggs per day. White heavy checkmark 1 handful spinach, raw or sautéed. White heavy checkmark 1 tablespoon olive oil, on anything. Beside it. Move. Lift. Record. No excuses. And beneath that. Strength equals freedom, in all caps. That morning, Jack made eggs again. Not burned this time. He sautéed spinach in olive oil. Threw in some garlic. Cracked the eggs right into the pan and let them fry sunny side up. He plated it with military precision. Took a photo. Sent it to Emma, just the picture and the caption. Musk diet. Day 3. Don't laugh. She replied within seconds. Wait. Are you serious? Astonished face. I've literally been in that study. It's real, Dad. It's working on our end too. Jack's eyebrows shot up. In the study? Emma knew. He called her. Why didn't you tell me you were in this? She laughed. Because you'd say it was ridiculous. Also, I didn't want to be the one preaching spinach to my meat and potatoes, Dad. Jack grunted. Fair. But if you're in, she added, her voice warming, I'll send you the real materials. The good stuff. Not just Reddit leaks. Jack grinned. You think I'll keep this up? I think, she said, this is the first time in 3 years you've sounded like you. He didn't say anything. Didn't have to. That night, Jack didn't scroll Twitter. Didn't open YouTube. He sat in his recliner, pulled out the Tesla notebook, and wrote. Day 3. Found the leak. Eggs, spinach, olive oil, white heavy checkmark. Emma's in it too. I'm not alone in this. Then he underlined that last line. Twice. Because it had been so long since he felt that, not alone. Jack Reynolds hadn't lifted anything heavier than a coffee mug in weeks. But today, he had a plan. It didn't involve barbells or a gym membership. It started with a can of black beans. He stood in his garage, surrounded by the ghosts of projects past, old car parts, a rusted toolbox, Margaret's gardening supplies still covered in soil dust. He cleared a small space, rolled out a blue yoga mat Emma had sent him a year ago, he hadn't used it, not once, and lined up 2 cans of beans like they were dumbbells from another universe. This is ridiculous, he muttered. But still, he picked them up. The first few reps were laughable. Not because they were easy, but because he could feel how weak he'd become. Shoulder presses, bicep curls, some awkward triceps move he vaguely remembered from a YouTube video. The burn hit quicker than expected. By the 3rd round, his arms were trembling. Really? Over beans, he said out loud. But something else was happening too, his heart rate was climbing. Not in a panic, but in effort. Honest, focused, earned effort. He finished the set and sat on the workbench, catching his breath, sweat forming on his temples. For the first time in months, Jack Reynolds was tired, on purpose. He pulled out his Tesla notebook. Day 4. 3 sets W/bean cans, don't laugh. Muscles equals jelly. But damn. I did it. He stared at that last line. Circled it. After the workout, he showered and made the same breakfast as before. Eggs with spinach and olive oil. This time, he added a pinch of turmeric. Read it helped inflammation. He chewed slower today. Savoring it not just as food, but as fuel. Around noon, Emma called. I sent you a spreadsheet, she said. It's the real Tesla plan. It tracks strength, sleep, protein, VO2, everything. Jack laughed. I don't need a spreadsheet to know I'm weak. She ignored him. I also sent you resistance bands. They'll be there tomorrow. Great, Jack said. Can't wait to embarrass myself in new ways. Emma paused. You know. I'm proud of you, right? Jack looked out the window. That sentence didn't land gently. It crashed through his chest and lit something up inside. I'm trying, he finally said. That's all I ever wanted. The rest of the day was quiet. He read a bit. Stretched. Took a walk to the end of the street. Even noticed how the breeze felt different when your body's awake. At one point, he caught his reflection in the hallway mirror. Still old. Still soft. But standing straighter. That night, he journaled again. Day 4, evening check-in. Walked 1 block. Didn't wheeze. Smiled once. Underneath, he wrote. Wins don't have to be loud. Sometimes, the smallest flex is the biggest fight. The next morning, he almost skipped the workout. His legs were sore, and his shoulders ached like hell. He poured coffee and sat on the back porch. That's when he remembered something Margaret used to say after her chemo treatments. It's not about wanting to do it. It's about showing your body you're still here. He got up. Went back to the garage. Grabbed the beans. And started moving again. By day 6, he'd moved up to light dumbbells, 2-pound pink ones he found in the back of the closet from some fitness phase Margaret had once attempted. They looked ridiculous in his hands. He didn't care. He followed along with a senior strength class on YouTube. The instructor smiled too much and called him champ through the screen. Jack rolled his eyes. But he finished the workout. And he felt stronger. Not a lot. But enough. Day 7. Emma video called. Jack answered mid-set, breathless. You're doing squats. Don't tell anyone, he said, grunting through another rep. She smiled. You're gonna be so sore tomorrow. He shrugged. Good. Reminds me I'm still in this fight. Later that night, after dinner, Jack looked back over his notebook. A full week of entries. Not perfect. Not even impressive, really. But they were his. And for the first time since Margaret died, he wasn't just existing. He was living again. The air was crisp for a late afternoon in early October. Jack was on his usual walk, the kind that had become as familiar as breathing over the past week. The routine was comforting, and the soreness in his legs felt like a badge of honor rather than something to be avoided. He passed the local park, a small, community space with a worn-down track and a couple of benches by the basketball courts. It wasn't much, but it was his stretch of pavement. Every day, without fail, he'd walk around the loop, one lap after another, just to keep his legs from seizing up. Today, as he rounded the corner of the track, he noticed an older man sitting on one of the benches, head tilted back slightly, eyes closed. His white hair was thin, but the face beneath it was weathered with deep lines, each one a story Jack could only guess at. The man had a slow, deliberate energy, like he wasn't trying to prove anything, but still was something. His body, too, seemed smaller, fragile in a way Jack couldn't ignore. But there was strength there. Without thinking, Jack slowed his pace, heading towards the bench, the habit of social courtesy pulling him toward the stranger. Beautiful day, huh? Jack said as he passed, trying not to seem intrusive. The man opened one eye, then the other, a slow smile creeping across his face. Couldn't ask for better, he said, his voice gravelly but warm. Jack nodded, standing a little awkwardly, unsure whether to keep walking or sit down. The man motioned to the empty spot beside him. Pull up a seat. You've got the look of someone who's trying to outrun something. Jack raised an eyebrow, surprised. You think? The old man chuckled, a deep, rich sound that made Jack's shoulders loosen. You've got the eyes. The kind that've seen too much sitting still. But you're still moving. That counts for something. Jack felt a sudden surge of curiosity mixed with hesitation. What the hell, he thought. He hadn't spoken to anyone outside of Emma or his doctor for days. He sat down beside the man, keeping his distance but still feeling an odd sense of camaraderie. Name's Jack, he said, offering a hand. George, the man replied, shaking Jack's hand with surprising strength for his age. You come here often? Every day now, Jack answered, surprised by how quickly the truth came out. Started a new habit. George's eyes sparkled. "How's it going?" "Terrible," Jack said bluntly. "But I'm doing it anyway." George let out a soft laugh. "Well, you've got something figured out, then." Jack wasn't sure how to respond to that, so he didn't. Instead, he stared out at the park, watching a few kids shooting hoops. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the grass. After a long pause, George spoke again. "You know, I didn't always sit here and watch people go by." Jack turned his head to face him. "What do you mean?" "I mean," George said slowly, "there was a time I couldn't stand to see anyone else moving without feeling like I was getting left behind." Jack nodded. He knew that feeling all too well. "Yeah, I get that. I've been a little freaked out, honestly. I didn't think aging would hit me this hard. It's like I woke up one day and everything started to hurt." George smiled knowingly. "It does. That's the funny thing about it. You wake up and think it's just age, but really, it's all those small moments you let slip by when you could have been doing something. Doesn't even have to be big. Just a few minutes of movement, a couple of stretches." Jack frowned. "You sound like a health coach." "Maybe I am," George replied. "But I'm also an old man who spent most of his life avoiding things, until my body made me face the truth. My knees, my back, my balance, everything started to go." Jack blinked, his chest tightening a little. "So what did you do?" "I started small," George said, looking down at his hands. "Walking. Stretching. I didn't have anyone telling me what to do. But after a while, I realized that it wasn't just about muscles. It was about the mind. Getting out of my head and into my body. That's the real work." There was something about George's calm, nonchalant attitude that hit Jack deep in the chest. For all his focus on the physical, all his reading on the latest science, Jack hadn't considered how much his mind was fighting against the work, too. The reluctance. The doubt. The belief that it was all just too late. "Sounds like you've got this all figured out," Jack said, half impressed. George's eyes twinkled. "I wouldn't say figured out. But I'm still here, still doing it. And when I see someone else trying, no matter how small it is, I know they've got a shot." Jack shifted, looking back at the basketball court. It wasn't much, just a few kids laughing and shooting shots that didn't always make it. He felt an odd swell in his chest. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was a realization. After a few minutes of quiet, Jack stood up. "Thanks for the talk, George." George gave him a knowing nod. "Just keep moving, Jack. And remember, it's not the pace that matters. It's the persistence." Jack smiled, feeling the first real sense of peace since starting this journey. "Will do," he said, turning to walk away. But before he could take his first step, he turned back to George. "Hey, you still move like this every day?" George's grin stretched wider. "Every day, Jack. I've got nothing else to do but move." Jack walked away, a little lighter than before. His legs ached, his arms still felt weak, but the weight in his chest had lifted. He wasn't alone in this fight. The package arrived on a Thursday. Emma had texted him the day before, "Bands should be there by tomorrow. Get ready to feel the burn." Jack had laughed at that. Feel the burn was a term reserved for serious athletes, or at least people who weren't almost 60 and had just started moving again after a long period of not. But when the box arrived, he felt a rush of nervous energy. He ripped open the packaging, revealing the sleek, bright-colored resistance bands, blue, green, and red. Each had a different resistance level. They looked simple. No weights. No complex machines. Just bands. He pulled them out, staring at them for a moment. This is going to change everything. He rolled the bands in his hands, as if trying to decide whether to throw them back in the box or actually give them a shot. That afternoon, Jack stood in the middle of his living room, facing his coffee table like it was the edge of a cliff. He wasn't sure what he was expecting, some magic trick, maybe, or a sudden rush of strength he hadn't felt in years. The instructions that came with the bands were clear enough. A quick guide to exercises. Squats. Chest presses. Rows. The movements were basic, and he knew how to do them. So why was he suddenly so anxious? He chose the red band first, the toughest one. It had the highest resistance, and, for some reason, it felt like the best choice. Go big or go home, right? Jack stepped on the middle of the band, gripping the ends tightly in his hands. He positioned his feet wide, like the guide suggested, and began his first set of squats. Squat. His knees creaked. Squat. His back hunched, like it had forgotten what good posture was. The resistance from the band was noticeable but manageable, so he pushed through. On the third rep, his legs were already burning. By the fifth, he was panting. It was only when he hit the eighth rep that he felt it. Something snapped, like a rubber band, ironically enough. The discomfort turned to a dull ache that radiated from his legs to his lower back. Jack stopped and straightened up, his breath coming quicker than before. What the hell, he muttered to himself. He couldn't remember the last time something had left him this winded. A few minutes later, Jack was sitting on the couch, rubbing his legs. He realized something. The bands weren't like the gym machines he used to see people struggle with. They didn't give you a moment's rest. Every pull, every stretch, was like a test. A reminder that you had to keep going even when it hurt. And that was hard. Jack stretched the bands and tried another set. This time, he opted for the green band, medium resistance. His mind was telling him to take it easy, but the competitive part of him, the part that had always fought against weakness, pushed him to challenge himself. After a couple more sets, his arms were sore. He felt shaky in places he hadn't noticed before. His legs, his core, even his wrists were working in ways they hadn't in years. There was no denying it, these bands were forcing him to engage muscles he'd forgotten about. He'd expected an immediate transformation. But instead, all he got was exhaustion, soreness, and doubt. The burn was real, but so was the frustration. He wasn't sure if he'd actually done something good for himself, or if he'd just made it harder. The next morning, when he went to check his notebook, he found the page he'd left blank. Day 8. Resistance bands are harder than I thought. Felt the burn. But also, felt like I did too much. Is this how it's supposed to feel? His hand hovered over the notebook. Should I be disappointed? He wondered. After all, this was supposed to be a small win. A step forward. Instead, it felt like a roadblock. But wasn't that what real growth was about? Jack had spent so many years avoiding the tough stuff, avoiding the weight of failure. Now, here it was again. Right in front of him. He glanced at his phone to check the time and saw a text from Emma. How's the resistance band workout going? Did it destroy you yet? Face with tears of joy. Jack smiled to himself. It wasn't the response he had expected, but it was the one he needed. He typed back. You weren't kidding about the burn. I thought I could handle it. But damn, it's tough. Emma's response came almost immediately. Toughness is the point. Trust the process, Dad. You're still doing it. That's more than most people can say. Jack let out a slow breath. She was right. He had to trust the process. Even if it felt like nothing was changing. Even if the workouts weren't easy. Because it wasn't supposed to be easy. That was the whole point. He grabbed the bands again, stretched them out, and took a deep breath. This time, he went for the green one, the middle resistance. Let's try this again, he muttered to himself. It wasn't supposed to be easy. Jack had told himself that when he began this journey. He'd known, deep down, that real change would take time. But the days were starting to blur together, and the feeling of not getting anywhere was starting to creep into his bones. After his last frustrating session with the resistance bands, Jack hadn't touched them for a couple of days. They lay in the corner of the living room, staring at him like they were calling his name. He knew he had to get back to it, but the doubt in his head was louder than his motivation. Maybe it's just not meant for me. What if I'm too old for this? I don't feel any stronger. Just sore. But that morning, something shifted. He had woken up earlier than usual, and when he dragged himself out of bed, his first thought wasn't "I can skip today." Instead, it was a quiet voice saying, "Just try. Just for today." Jack didn't bother overthinking it. He got dressed in the same workout clothes from the day before, those loose, faded sweatpants that were too comfortable to throw out, and made his way to the living room. The bands were still there, waiting. He picked up the blue band, the lightest resistance, just to get started. For the first time in a while, Jack didn't feel the overwhelming weight of expectation. Instead, he just focused on the basics. The squat. The row. The shoulder press. The movement. He set a timer for 15 minutes, nothing crazy, just enough to keep him moving for a stretch of time. The burn was still there, and by the time the timer went off, his muscles were tingling and sore. But this time, he didn't feel defeated. Instead, he felt something else, a sense of accomplishment. He'd shown up. Again. He stretched, taking deep breaths. And for the first time, he felt a little lighter. That evening, he sat down to write in his notebook. Day 9. 15-minute resistance band workout. Still sore, but it felt better today. Realized I didn't think about quitting. I didn't want to, even when it was tough. Not sure why I'm so surprised by that. The next day, Jack's routine had shifted. He wasn't looking at the resistance bands with dread anymore. He saw them as part of the process, not a hurdle to overcome. He began doing small stretches throughout the day, when he woke up, before meals, after dinner. He didn't need to schedule it anymore, his body was beginning to crave the movement. By the end of the week, Jack had moved from doing a light 15-minute workout to working up to 30 minutes. He even tried mixing in some bodyweight exercises, including push-ups and lunges. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't fast. But it was real. His legs still felt sore, but it was a familiar kind of pain, the kind that meant something was happening. Emma had checked in by phone. "Dad, you've been keeping up with the bands, right?" Jack smiled. "Yeah, I'm getting there. It's not exactly fun, but it's not as miserable as I thought either." Emma laughed. "That's progress, right? It's like I said, consistency. The more you do it, the easier it gets." And that was the crux of it, the consistency. Jack had heard people say that 1,000 times before, but now it was sinking in. He wasn't going to wake up tomorrow and be magically strong. He wasn't going to press a button and have his muscles build themselves. It was about showing up. Every day. One afternoon, as Jack walked through the park, he noticed a few changes. His breathing was smoother. His back didn't hurt as much. The aches in his knees had started to lessen. He didn't feel young, but for the first time in a long while, he felt something else, alive. At the park, he passed by the bench where George had been sitting the other day. George wasn't there this time, but the bench seemed to carry a different weight in his mind. He wasn't just someone to talk to. George had unknowingly shared something important, the idea that change was gradual, not instant. That evening, Jack went for another short walk around the neighborhood, and when he came back inside, he found himself looking at the resistance bands again. Maybe it was time to bump up the intensity. Day 10. Took a walk after dinner. Band workout felt easier today, good sign. I'm not looking for a quick fix anymore. I'm building a habit. That's the goal. He smiled, closing his notebook. This was it. The beginning of something new. A way of living that didn't rely on grand gestures but rather the quiet power of small, everyday choices. Jack wasn't racing against the clock anymore. He wasn't trying to make up for lost time. Instead, he was simply moving. It was supposed to be just another workout. Jack had felt good that morning. It was a crisp Saturday, the kind of day where the world seemed to slow down just a bit. He had woken up early, done a few stretches, and by 10 a.m., he was already on his second cup of coffee. It felt like the day was his for the taking. He'd been steadily increasing the intensity of his workouts. More reps, more resistance. More variety. Every day, Jack had been showing up, just as he promised himself. There was a rhythm to it now, a sense of quiet pride in knowing he'd stuck with something for this long. Today, however, something didn't feel right. Jack stood in the living room, band in hand. He stretched the blue band a few times, as he always did, just to warm up. He glanced at his notebook on the coffee table. Day 12, more reps, more sets. Progress is happening. But as soon as he began his first squat, he felt it. A sharp twinge in his lower back. Not the usual soreness that came from pushing his muscles, but a quick, biting pain that made him stop in his tracks. He froze for a moment, then gingerly reached for his back. His breath hitched as he tried to stretch it out, but the pain was there, persistent, reminding him that this journey wasn't as straightforward as he'd hoped. Jack stood there, the band still in his hands, wondering what had just happened. He hadn't pushed too hard. He hadn't done anything differently. What the hell is this? He sat down on the couch, massaging his lower back. The discomfort was familiar, but in a way, it felt worse. He knew he hadn't been entirely gentle with his body, but he hadn't expected an injury. Not this soon. For a moment, panic crept in. He had come so far. He had worked so hard to build something. What if he couldn't keep going? Maybe this is it. Maybe my body just isn't built for this anymore. The thought chilled him. Jack had gotten comfortable with the idea that his age wasn't an obstacle, he could still move, still grow stronger. But now, this pain felt like a cruel reminder of his limitations. The clock on the wall ticked, loud and steady. Jack stared at the resistance bands, wondering if they were really worth the pain. He had been pushing his body, and now it was fighting back. Should he stop? Should he rest? But then, something unexpected happened. Emma's voice echoed in his mind. You're not going for perfection, Dad. You're going for persistence. That simple reminder, so obvious yet so powerful, shifted something in Jack. Maybe he hadn't been perfect. But he had kept going. He got up slowly and walked over to his notebook, feeling the dull ache in his back with each step. He jotted down a quick note, though his handwriting was messier than usual. Day 12. Felt pain in my lower back. Not sure what happened, but it's worse than usual. I need to rest, but I'm not stopping. Jack knew he couldn't just power through this like he had with everything else. His body needed rest. His back was telling him something important, slow down. But that didn't mean giving up. Not this time. The next few days were a test of patience. Jack took it easy. He cancelled his usual workouts, opting for long walks instead. The pain in his back faded over time, but the fear lingered. What if he never fully recovered? What if this was his body's way of telling him that he was too old for this kind of training? He spent the following days doing light stretches, some yoga, and focusing on walking. He would start with just a short stroll around the block, then slowly build up to longer walks. Every time he felt a sharp twinge, he would stop and stretch it out. By the end of the week, Jack was starting to feel more like himself. The back pain had eased, and his confidence was returning. He stood in front of the mirror, examining his reflection for any sign of change. It wasn't drastic, but something was different. There was a subtle tone in his arms, his chest. His posture was a little straighter. His legs didn't ache with every step. But more than anything, Jack was learning how to listen to his body. It wasn't about pushing through the pain. It was about balance. The next day, Jack picked up the resistance bands again. This time, he started with the blue one, light resistance. He did only a few reps, no pressure. Just movement. He didn't expect much from the workout. All he wanted was to prove to himself that he could keep going without pushing too hard. He wanted to prove that he could still show up, even when things didn't go according to plan. Day 14. Back feels better today. Took it easy. Did a light session with the bands. I'm listening to my body. Progress isn't always linear, but I'm not quitting. Setbacks didn't mean failure. They were part of the process. He wasn't in a race. This wasn't about perfection. This was about showing up, adjusting, and keeping the momentum going. And so, Jack took a deep breath and smiled. The path forward wasn't always clear, but that was okay. Because he knew one thing for sure, he wasn't giving up. Not now. Not ever. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jack sat quietly at the kitchen table, sipping his morning coffee. The sun had just begun to spill through the windows, painting the room in warm golden hues. For a moment, everything felt still, calm, and steady. It was a rare moment of peace amidst the chaos of his thoughts. For the past few days, Jack had been easing back into his workout routine. He wasn't pushing himself too hard, just light stretches, gentle resistance band exercises, and short walks. His back was feeling better, but more than that, something else had begun to shift inside him. He had noticed it a few days ago during one of his walks. He was moving at a steady pace, breathing deeply, and suddenly it hit him, this isn't just about strength. The realization came quietly, almost like a whisper in the back of his mind. He wasn't just working out to build muscle or lose weight. This journey wasn't just about his physical body. It was about something deeper, something he hadn't fully understood until now. It was about resilience. It was about mental strength. It was about showing up, even when the path ahead was unclear, even when his body wasn't cooperating. It was about overcoming his own doubts, pushing through the discomfort, and not letting the small setbacks derail his progress. As Jack sat at the kitchen table, the realization settled in like a quiet revelation. This was more than just a fitness journey. This was about reclaiming his life. Jack had always prided himself on being a problem solver. But the truth was, he had spent so much of his life focusing on solving external problems, work, family, relationships, that he hadn't taken the time to solve the internal ones. The ones that involved his own well-being, his self-doubt, and his fears about aging. For so long, Jack had viewed fitness as something external, something that could be checked off a list, a goal to be achieved. But now, he saw it as a tool to reconnect with himself, to push through old mental barriers, and to remind himself that he was more than his age or his limitations. The past few weeks had been a series of small victories, some physical, some emotional. He had pushed through soreness, frustration, and even moments of doubt. But now, he realized that the real win wasn't in lifting heavier or doing more reps, it was in the mindset shift he had been quietly cultivating all along. The weight wasn't just on his shoulders, it was in his thoughts, his fears, and his expectations. And every time he showed up for himself, every time he pushed through the doubt, he was building something far more valuable than muscle. He was building mental resilience. It felt strange to admit it at first, but Jack realized that this journey, this process of gradual change, wasn't about fixing something broken. It was about evolving, adapting, and learning to live with purpose in every moment. It was about acknowledging that he didn't need to be perfect, that the path wouldn't always be smooth, but that he could still make progress. That afternoon, he went for another walk. this time, the familiar discomfort in his back didn't feel like an obstacle. Instead, it felt like an opportunity, a reminder that he could still challenge himself and keep going. His steps were slower than before, but they were steady, determined. As he walked, Jack couldn't help but reflect on the changes that had taken place over the past few months. He'd started this journey thinking it was just about fitness. But now, he saw that it was about reclaiming his ability to face challenges with courage and perseverance. It was about finding strength in places he hadn't expected. When he returned home, Jack picked up his notebook and began writing. Day 15. Walked for 30 minutes today. My back still aches a bit, but it's getting better. The big realization, this journey isn't just physical. It's mental. I'm not just building muscle. I'm building resilience. It's not about being perfect. It's about showing up, again and again. He smiled as he closed the notebook, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't expected. The journey wasn't over. But for the first time in a long while, Jack felt like he was truly moving forward, not just physically, but in every aspect of his life. Later that evening, Emma called. How's the back? Still giving you trouble? Jack laughed softly. It's better, actually. I'm taking it easy, but I realized something today. Something profound, I'm guessing. Emma teased. Jack chuckled. Yeah, you could say that. It's not just about getting stronger physically. It's about being stronger in the mind, too. And I've been so focused on the physical stuff that I missed the mental part of this journey. Emma paused. That's huge, Dad. I'm really proud of you. Jack's heart swelled with pride. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was just surviving. He was living. Jack stood in front of the mirror, surveying his reflection. It wasn't drastic, the changes that had begun to take place in his body. His arms were a little more defined, his posture straighter. But the biggest transformation was happening on the inside. The past few weeks had taught him something he hadn't expected. It wasn't about doing something perfectly, it was about showing up. Day in and day out. It was about consistency, the kind that built momentum over time. The mental clarity he had experienced in the previous chapter hadn't just been a one-time revelation. It was an awakening. He understood now that change wasn't a single burst of energy or effort, it was a constant rhythm, a steady beat that he had to keep following. Consistency had become his greatest ally. Not because it was easy, but because it worked. Each day, he showed up for his workouts, even when it felt like the progress was slow. He didn't need dramatic results. He just needed to keep moving. One afternoon, as he prepared for his daily resistance band routine, Jack thought back to where he had started. It had all seemed so daunting at first. The soreness. The frustration. The uncertainty. But now, after weeks of consistent effort, things had changed. He didn't dread the workouts anymore. He didn't expect miracles. But the small progress was starting to add up, like drops of water that, over time, filled a cup. The morning routine had become a ritual. Every day, he woke up, made coffee, did some stretches, and then started his workout. He didn't need motivation anymore. It was no longer a choice, it was just what he did. The change wasn't always obvious, but Jack was beginning to feel it. His energy was higher. He slept better. The aches in his joints were less frequent. And, perhaps most importantly, his back had stopped bothering him. Day 17. Same routine today. Resistance bands, light squats, and stretches. Noticed I feel stronger. Even if it's not visible, it's there. I don't feel the need to measure progress all the time. I can just feel it. Jack smiled as he closed his notebook. He realized that the key to his success wasn't in a grand breakthrough. It wasn't about hitting a certain weight or achieving an Instagram-worthy physique. It was about the small wins. The consistency. The commitment to just keep going. That evening, Jack went for his walk, a ritual he had come to appreciate more than he ever thought he would. The air was crisp, and the streetlights cast a soft glow on the sidewalk. As he walked, he thought about all the times he had given up in the past. All the times he'd let setbacks or distractions derail his progress. But this time was different. This time, he had learned the power of showing up. And showing up was enough. He thought about George, the older man he had met at the park months ago. George had talked about the importance of staying active in old age. At the time, Jack hadn't fully understood what George meant, but now it was clear. It wasn't about being the best or the fastest, it was about maintaining a steady, consistent effort. Jack continued walking, letting the cool evening air calm his mind. He was far from perfect, but he was making progress. And that, in itself, felt like a huge victory. The next morning, Jack decided to take his workout up a notch. He wasn't going to push too hard, just enough to challenge himself. He grabbed the medium resistance band this time, a bit stronger than the light blue one he had been using. The workout was simple: squats, rows, shoulder presses. The burn was there, but it didn't feel overwhelming. In fact, Jack felt good afterward. He didn't expect to see dramatic results right away, but he knew that if he kept going, the consistency would pay off. As he stretched, Jack thought about the advice he had received from Emma early on: this is a marathon, not a sprint. It was hard to remember that in the moments of frustration when progress seemed too slow, but now it was starting to sink in. Jack was no longer in a rush. He wasn't trying to change everything overnight. He had learned to trust the process. The following week, Jack's workouts continued to grow. His routine was steady, and his body was slowly becoming stronger. He mixed in different exercises, but always stuck to the basics. Resistance bands, bodyweight exercises, walking. No gimmicks. No shortcuts. Just consistent, gradual effort. Day 20. The most consistent week so far. Felt stronger. More energy throughout the day. My mindset has shifted. This is about the long haul. No quick fixes. Just small, consistent steps. Jack looked at his reflection again that evening, this time with a sense of quiet pride. He wasn't where he wanted to be yet, but he was closer than he had been yesterday. And tomorrow, he'd be even closer. The truth was, the real victory wasn't in the physical transformation, it was in the mental shift. Jack had learned that consistency wasn't just a habit, it was a mindset. And with that mindset, there was no limit to how far he could go. It had been weeks since Jack first picked up the resistance bands, weeks since he had made the decision to commit to something bigger than himself. Yet, on this crisp Saturday morning, as he stood in front of the mirror, he couldn't help but feel frustrated. The progress, though there, seemed so slow. There were days when it felt like he wasn't getting any stronger, wasn't improving fast enough. His muscles didn't look any bigger, his endurance wasn't significantly better. In fact, on certain days, he felt downright discouraged. He placed his hands on the bathroom sink, taking a deep breath. Patience, he reminded himself. This isn't going to happen overnight. The lesson had been a hard one to learn. Jack had always been a man of action, someone who prided himself on solving problems quickly and efficiently. Patience had never been his strong suit. He was used to seeing results fast, especially at work, where things moved at a rapid pace. But here, in his journey to reclaim his health, the results weren't instantaneous. The small victories were starting to add up, but they were hard to see on a daily basis. There was no before and after moment that slapped him in the face and said, "Look. You've done it." No, the changes were more subtle than that. He had learned over the past few weeks that the key to lasting change wasn't just in the effort, it was in trusting the process. But that was easier said than done, especially on days like today, when the mirror seemed to mock him with the same reflection he'd seen months ago. Jack sighed and grabbed his workout journal from the counter, flipping back to his entries from the past weeks. His eyes landed on day 9, where he had written. Day 9. Struggling with back pain. Frustrated. Wondering if this is worth it. Then, he flipped to day 20, the one he had just written yesterday. Day 20. The most consistent week so far. Felt stronger. More energy throughout the day. My mindset has shifted. This is about the long haul. No quick fixes. Just small, consistent steps. Jack smiled softly to himself. Despite the frustrations, he was making progress, maybe not in the way he had expected, but it was still progress. The change wasn't always measurable by weight or muscle size. It was in his energy, his mindset, his ability to show up every day. Patience, Jack thought again. It wasn't just about waiting for the physical changes. It was about trusting that the hard work was paying off, even when it felt like nothing was happening. That afternoon, Jack decided to take a different approach to his workout. Instead of focusing on pushing himself through reps, he chose to focus on the experience. He listened to his body more intently, paying attention to how his muscles felt as he moved, how his breath deepened with each stretch. It wasn't about how many sets he could do. It was about the quality of the movement. He grabbed his resistance bands and set up in the living room. The day's workout was simple: squats, rows, and some gentle shoulder exercises. He didn't rush. He didn't count the reps, he just moved slowly, feeling each stretch, each pull. For the first time in a while, Jack stopped worrying about the outcome. Instead of thinking about how many calories he was burning or how much stronger he should be by now, he thought about how good it felt to simply move his body. He finished the workout with a deep sense of satisfaction. He hadn't lifted more weight or gone through a grueling routine, but he had listened to his body, and in that moment, it was enough. Later that evening, as he was preparing dinner, Emma called again. "How's the back feeling, Dad?" she asked. "It's better," Jack replied, but then paused. "You know, I've been thinking a lot lately." "Oh. About what?" Emma asked, sounding curious. "I think I've been looking at this whole journey wrong," Jack admitted. "I've been so focused on what I can achieve physically that I've missed something important. This isn't just about lifting more or doing more reps, it's about trusting the process and being patient with myself." Emma smiled on the other end of the line. "That's a big realization, Dad. I'm proud of you for figuring that out." Jack chuckled. "I guess I'm a little slow to learn sometimes, huh?" "No, you're just learning at your own pace. And that's okay," Emma said softly. "It's not a race, Dad." Jack hung up the phone feeling lighter. Emma's words echoed in his mind, "It's not a race." The next few days were a reminder of just how important patience truly was. The progress was still there, but it was subtle. It wasn't about the daily changes anymore, it was about accepting that things would take time. He had to trust that he was on the right path, even when it didn't seem like much was happening. By the end of the week, Jack had a new sense of peace about his journey. He wasn't in a hurry to reach some destination. He was learning to enjoy the process. The workouts, the rest, the good days, the bad days, they were all part of a bigger picture. And for once, Jack was okay with that. Day 25. A week of steady workouts and patience. Noticing more strength in my movements, even if it's not visible. I've stopped comparing myself to others. This is my journey, and I'm moving forward at my own pace. Patience is key. Jack closed his journal, feeling more content than he had in a long time. It wasn't just about physical health, it was about learning to be kind to himself, to trust in the process, and to be patient with his own growth. The evening air was cool as Jack sat on the porch, a mug of chamomile tea in his hands. The faint hum of the neighborhood settled around him, the sound of distant cars, the rustling of leaves in the trees. It was peaceful, but Jack couldn't shake the thoughts that had been swirling in his mind all day. His workout routine had been going well, even though he still felt like there was more to be done. His muscles felt stronger, his back wasn't bothering him as much, and his energy was more consistent. But, for some reason, the mental block still lingered. He had been feeling a deep-seated frustration that he couldn't quite place. Jack had spent most of his life focusing on tangible results. He thrived on seeing things happen quickly, on being able to check off boxes and mark things as done. But this journey, this transformation he was going through, didn't fit neatly into his typical checklist. As much as he tried to focus on physical improvements, lifting more, running longer, pushing through more pain, he found himself more frustrated than ever. The scale didn't move the way he expected. His body didn't change overnight. His back still ached occasionally. And while his workouts were more consistent than they had been in months, something inside of him felt off. It wasn't just about the physical changes anymore. Jack was beginning to realize that he had been approaching this all wrong. He had been measuring success with the wrong metrics. With a sigh, Jack stood up and moved to his notebook on the kitchen counter. He flipped it open and stared at the past few weeks of entries. The frustration was evident in the way he had written. He had been too focused on measuring results, on seeing fast improvements, on expecting instant results. But somewhere in all of that, he had lost sight of the bigger picture. He scribbled down his thoughts. Day 30. Frustration. Noticing that the physical results aren't coming as fast as I'd hoped. Revelation. I've been measuring the wrong thing. It's not about physical changes. It's about the mental shift. Lesson. I need to embrace the process, not the end result. Jack paused as he reread the entry. There it was. The breakthrough he had been searching for. It wasn't about the body, it was about his mind. It was about how he was learning to think differently, to approach each day with a sense of gratitude, patience, and acceptance. It was easy to get caught up in the chase for perfection, especially when society pushed those ideals at every turn. Everyone wanted instant results. Instant gratification. But real change, lasting change, wasn't about quick fixes. It was about building mental strength as much as physical strength. For the first time, Jack realized that his journey wasn't just about doing more, pushing harder, or achieving a specific goal. It was about learning how to think differently. It was about letting go of the need for immediate results and understanding that the change he was going through wasn't just physical. It was mental. That night, Jack found himself reflecting more on his mental state. All those years he had spent focused on checking off goals, solving problems, and striving for perfection had taken a toll on his ability to just be. He had been so focused on achieving external success that he hadn't learned to focus on the internal victories. As the days passed, Jack began to apply this new mindset to his daily routine. When he woke up for his morning stretch, he didn't rush through it. He took his time, appreciating the small movements, paying attention to the subtle ways his body was waking up. He focused on feeling each stretch and each movement rather than counting the number of reps. Even during his workouts, he began to let go of the need to track every single set and every ounce of progress. Instead, he shifted his focus to how his body felt. How was his energy? How was his posture? How was his attitude toward the work he was doing? One afternoon, he walked to the park, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face. The path was familiar, but something about it felt different now. His stride was lighter, his shoulders were more relaxed. Jack realized that he had stopped looking at his fitness journey as a series of goals to meet and had begun seeing it as an ongoing process. The transformation wasn't just about strength. It was about growth. About learning to accept that there would be days when progress seemed invisible. And those were the days that mattered the most. That evening, Jack called Emma again. He needed to share this newfound clarity with her. "Hey, Dad. How's everything going?" Emma's voice crackled through the phone. "I think I'm finally getting it," Jack said, his voice a little more certain than before. "I've been so focused on seeing results that I've been missing the real change happening. It's not just about pushing myself harder or seeing my muscles grow. It's about the way I'm thinking about all of this. Emma paused for a moment. What do you mean? Jack smiled as he leaned back in his chair. I mean that the biggest change isn't in my body, it's in my mindset. I've been measuring myself by all the wrong standards. It's not about seeing a six-pack or lifting more weight. It's about showing up every day, doing the work, and appreciating the journey. It's about growth, not just results. I'm really proud of you, Dad, Emma said, her voice soft but filled with pride. That's a big shift. And you're right, it's not about perfection. It's about progress. Jack felt a surge of gratitude for his daughter's support. In that moment, he realized that the most important thing wasn't the final destination. It was the path he was walking every day. And as long as he kept moving forward, he knew he was heading in the right direction. Day 35. Focused on the process, not the outcome. Realize that the true transformation is mental, not just physical. Every day is progress, even on the days when it feels like nothing is happening. Jack closed his journal and felt a deep sense of peace. He had been on this journey for months now, but for the first time, he felt like he had truly begun. It wasn't about lifting more or running faster. It was about becoming stronger inside, and that was the real victory. The sound of Jack's sneakers hitting the pavement had become a familiar rhythm over the past few months. He had grown accustomed to pushing himself, to that feeling of accomplishment after each workout, each session that brought him one step closer to his goal. But today was different. Jack had been training hard for the past several weeks, steadily increasing the intensity of his workouts. His muscles were sore, his back twinged occasionally, and his energy, once vibrant, now felt like it was being stretched thin. He had been feeling a little off for the past few days, nothing major, just a sense of fatigue that wouldn't go away no matter how much sleep he got. He slowed down his pace and decided to take a break, sitting on the nearby bench in the park. As he caught his breath, Jack realized something he had overlooked. All this time, he had been focusing only on the doing. The pushing. The lifting. The goal of getting stronger, faster, better. But he had neglected an essential piece of the puzzle, rest. It was ironic, really. As much as he had come to appreciate patience in his journey, Jack had never truly understood the importance of recovery. The idea of rest had always felt like a weakness in his mind, something that would slow him down. But as he sat there, catching his breath, he realized that rest wasn't the enemy, rest was a vital part of the process. Jack had heard about the importance of rest in fitness before, of course. He had read the articles, listened to the experts, but there had always been a part of him that pushed through it. That part of him that believed that if he didn't work hard every day, he wouldn't see results. But now, that mindset was beginning to change. Maybe I've been doing this all wrong, Jack thought to himself, massaging the tight muscles in his legs. He'd been so obsessed with pushing himself to the limit that he hadn't given his body the chance to rebuild, to heal, to actually grow stronger. His muscles didn't grow while he was lifting weights or running, they grew while he was resting. Jack glanced down at his phone, his fingers instinctively scrolling through his fitness app. There were a few reminders on the screen, messages from his coach about the importance of rest days. He had always brushed them off in the past, thinking they were for people who weren't serious about their fitness. But now, looking at those reminders, Jack realized that recovery wasn't just for others. It was for him too. His coach had said something that stuck with him: without proper recovery, the body can't repair itself. Rest is when progress is made, not during the workout. Suddenly, it clicked. He had been treating recovery as an afterthought when, in reality, it was just as important as the work itself. The next few days, Jack made an intentional effort to rest. He still went for walks and did light stretching, but he allowed himself to take a step back from his intense workouts. At first, it was hard. He felt restless, like he was doing something wrong. He missed the satisfaction of pushing his body to its limits. But as the days went on, something remarkable started to happen. His muscles, which had been aching and tired, began to feel less strained. His energy levels, which had been dwindling, started to return. He was sleeping more soundly, waking up feeling refreshed instead of fatigued. Even his mood seemed to improve. The mental fog that had clouded his mind began to clear, and Jack started to feel like himself again. It was on the fourth day of rest that Jack noticed a significant change. He woke up feeling light, not weighed down by soreness. He did a few stretches, then decided to take a short walk around the neighborhood. As he walked, he realized that he felt more in tune with his body than ever before. The aches in his back had lessened. His legs felt stronger, more stable. That afternoon, he decided to try a light workout. It wasn't much, just some bodyweight exercises and a few sets with his resistance bands, but the difference was clear. His muscles moved more fluidly. His posture was better. He wasn't forcing himself through the motions. He was moving with ease. It was as though his body had been waiting for this moment, the moment when it could finally repair itself, when the healing could take place. Later that day, Jack took a walk with Emma. As they strolled down the tree-lined streets, the conversation turned to fitness and progress. "I can't believe how much better I feel after a few days of rest," Jack said, his voice tinged with amazement. "I always thought I had to work through the pain to get stronger, but I think I was doing it all wrong." Emma laughed softly. "It's like when you're building a house. You don't just keep adding bricks. You have to give the structure time to settle, to firm up. Rest is the foundation." Jack chuckled at the analogy. "I think I've been treating myself like a machine. Push it hard, get results. But it's more like I've been trying to build muscle by tearing it down, without giving it time to repair." Emma nodded. "Exactly. It's like the saying goes, don't run yourself into the ground. You need to respect your body, Dad. You're not a machine. You're human." Jack felt a deep sense of gratitude toward his daughter. She had been so supportive through all of this, even when he had been too stubborn to listen to her advice about taking it easy. Now, he realized that this journey was as much about learning to listen to his body as it was about pushing his limits. Over the next few weeks, Jack continued to incorporate rest into his routine. He learned to balance hard workouts with days of active recovery. He swapped out some intense sessions for yoga or swimming, giving his muscles a chance to stretch and rebuild. The combination of hard work and recovery started to pay off. His body felt stronger, his energy levels were higher, and the aches that used to linger now came less frequently. Jack had learned a valuable lesson: rest wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a sign of strength. Day 40. Took 2 days off for recovery. Felt stronger after the break. Recovery is just as important as the workouts themselves. I'm learning to respect my body and listen to its needs. Jack closed his journal with a sense of contentment. He had been so focused on pushing forward that he had neglected to give himself permission to rest. But now he understood, rest was an essential part of the process. It wasn't about doing more all the time. Sometimes, it was about doing less and letting the body heal. It was a Saturday morning when Jack received the call. His phone buzzed as he was preparing breakfast, the scrambled eggs sizzling in the pan, and the smell of fresh coffee filling the kitchen. When he saw the caller ID, he smiled. It was Emma. "Hey, Dad." Emma's voice crackled through the phone, bright and warm, like the morning sun streaming through the window. "How's everything going? How's the back feeling?" Jack took a deep breath, setting the pan aside. He could feel the energy in her voice, her genuine curiosity and care. "Actually, it's been good," Jack said, his voice sounding steadier than it had in weeks. "I've been focusing on recovery, and it's really making a difference. My back's still not perfect, but it's definitely better." "That's awesome." Emma replied, her enthusiasm contagious. "I'm glad to hear that. So, what's next for you? You sticking with your plan?" Jack hesitated for a moment. His initial instinct was to keep going at full speed, pushing through each day like he had been. But something had changed. His mindset had evolved, and now he understood that the process wasn't about perfection. It was about progress, and sometimes that meant slowing down. I think I'm going to keep listening to my body. I've been doing better with taking rest days, but I'm realizing that having a solid routine isn't just about working harder, it's about working smarter. Emma laughed lightly. I know exactly what you mean. I've been pushing myself harder with my own training, but it's only been sustainable because I have a solid plan. It's so easy to just jump in and do more, but you have to balance it out. Jack smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude. Emma had always been the voice of reason, the one who saw things clearly when he was too caught up in the hustle. She had always understood that success didn't come from overexertion, but from balance. Speaking of which, Emma continued, I was thinking it might help if we did some workouts together. I know you've been doing a lot on your own, but maybe having some company would make it more fun. We could hold each other accountable. Jack's heart warmed at the idea. The thought of working out with Emma again reminded him of when she was younger and they used to go on walks together, or when she would help him get back into shape after his first round of back issues. That sounds like a great idea, Jack said, feeling a new sense of excitement. I think I've been isolating myself a bit too much lately. I've been focusing so much on doing it on my own, but maybe I need to remember that there's strength in numbers. Having you around could be exactly what I need. The next few days, Jack and Emma made a plan to start working out together twice a week. They decided on simple activities to begin with, yoga, walking, and light resistance training. Nothing too intense, but just enough to get them moving and engaged in each other's routines. That first workout together was a revelation for Jack. He had always prided himself on being independent, on handling things alone. But as he followed Emma's lead, doing stretches and exercises side by side, he realized that there was a certain energy that came with sharing the experience. When Emma held up a set of dumbbells and challenged him to do a few reps, Jack felt something inside him shift. It wasn't just about the physical effort, it was about the encouragement. She cheered him on as he struggled through each set, her words pushing him to do just a little more, to give it everything he had. By the time they finished, Jack felt exhilarated, not just from the workout, but from the connection. It had been a long time since he had shared such a vulnerable, personal part of his journey with someone else. As they cooled down and stretched, Emma spoke up again. You know, Dad, I think part of what's been helping me stay motivated is that I'm not doing it alone. Having people to check in with, to encourage me, really keeps me going. And I think it's the same for you. Jack nodded thoughtfully, wiping the sweat from his forehead. You're right. I've always thought I needed to be self-reliant, but having support is just as important. I've been missing out on that, haven't I? Emma smiled, her eyes sparkling. It's not about doing it all yourself. It's about lifting each other up. You've got me, and I've got you. And that's what makes the journey easier. Jack felt a deep sense of relief wash over him. It was true. He didn't have to do this on his own. It wasn't just about physical support, it was emotional, too. And now, more than ever, he understood that the journey toward health wasn't a solo endeavor. Over the following weeks, Jack and Emma's workouts became a regular part of their routine. They found themselves challenging each other, pushing each other to be better, not just physically, but mentally. They discussed their goals, shared their setbacks, and celebrated each small victory. The companionship gave Jack a renewed sense of purpose, reminding him that no one had to face the challenges of life alone. Meanwhile, Jack had also begun to open up more to his friends and colleagues. He had been hesitant at first, but he realized that by sharing his journey, he could inspire others. At work, he started talking about his fitness routine, encouraging his coworkers to make healthier choices. It wasn't about being perfect, but about taking small steps every day toward a healthier life. One day, after a particularly tough workout, Jack received a text from his friend Mark, who had noticed the changes in him. Mark, Hey, man, I've been noticing your posts and hearing about your workouts. You're really sticking with it, huh? Keep it up. I might join you one of these days. Jack smiled at the message. The support from his friends was growing, and it felt like a web of encouragement was forming around him. The more he shared his journey, the more others started reaching out, showing their own interest in improving their health. Jack realized that by allowing himself to be vulnerable, he was creating a network of people who were all rooting for each other. Day 45. Worked out with Emma twice this week. Realized the importance of having a support system. Starting to share my journey with friends and coworkers. This is not just about my progress, it's about lifting each other up. Jack sat back that evening, reflecting on how far he had come, not just in terms of his fitness, but in terms of his relationships. The path to better health had opened up new connections, new layers of support, and new opportunities for growth. It was an early morning when Jack felt it, an unusual stiffness in his shoulder as he stretched his arms overhead. He had just finished his morning routine of light stretching, but something wasn't right. A sharp twinge shot through his left shoulder, and he winced, immediately stopping the movement. What's going on? Jack thought, trying to move his shoulder gently. He'd never had a problem with it before. But today, something felt off, and it wasn't just discomfort, it was a pain that he couldn't ignore. He went through the rest of his stretches cautiously, but the discomfort lingered. By the time he finished, it was clear, something wasn't right. This wasn't just a simple ache from overuse, this felt like an injury. Jack immediately started to ice his shoulder, the cold pack soothing the inflammation as he sat on his couch. His mind began to race. This is the last thing I need. He had been making such great progress. Just last week, he had felt stronger than ever, more energized, more motivated. But now, this? He tried to shake it off, but the reality of the situation started to sink in. He had worked so hard to get to this point, and the thought of being sidelined by an injury was disheartening. His workout routine had been the cornerstone of his daily life for so long now. Would he have to stop everything? How long would it take to heal? It wasn't just the physical pain that bothered him. It was the fear of losing the progress he'd made. Jack had worked tirelessly for months, building strength and stamina, feeling confident in his body again. The idea of going backward felt like a punch to the gut. As he sat there, stewing in frustration, he thought back to something his coach had told him: progress isn't linear. You'll face setbacks. It's how you respond to them that will define you. Jack exhaled slowly, trying to calm his racing thoughts. He had faced setbacks before, both in fitness and in life. This wasn't the end of the road, it was simply a detour. He had to remind himself that injuries were a part of the process, and healing was a necessary phase in any fitness journey. Still, he couldn't shake the sense of disappointment. Jack had been so focused on improvement, on pushing forward, that the idea of stepping back was hard to accept. That afternoon, Jack called Emma. His daughter always had a way of putting things into perspective. "Hey, Dad. How's it going?" Emma's voice was calm, and Jack could sense her concern before he even said anything. "Not so good, actually," Jack replied, trying to keep his tone light. "I think I've hurt my shoulder. It's been bothering me all morning, and I'm not sure what happened." "Ugh, I'm sorry to hear that," Emma said. "How bad is it? Have you seen a doctor yet?" "I've iced it, but it's still painful. I'm hoping it's just a minor strain. I really don't want to take time off. I've been feeling so good lately." "I get it," Emma said, her voice understanding. "But listen, this is just a bump in the road. You've been working so hard, and you've made a ton of progress. You can't let one setback derail you." Jack paused, taking in her words. "Yeah, I know. It's just frustrating." "I'm sure it is," she replied. "But you've come a long way, and one injury doesn't erase all that hard work. You need to rest and let your body heal, or you'll just make things worse. "You've got this, Dad. Just take it slow, okay?" Jack felt a small wave of relief wash over him. Emma's words were a reminder that he wasn't alone in this. He had the support of his daughter, and he wasn't going to let this setback define his progress. The next day, Jack scheduled an appointment with his doctor to get his shoulder checked out. He wasn't taking any chances. After a thorough examination, the doctor confirmed that it was just a minor rotator cuff strain. The good news was that with proper rest and therapy, he could fully recover in a few weeks. "You'll need to take it easy for a while," the doctor advised. "No heavy lifting or intense workouts for at least 2 weeks. Focus on mobility exercises and stretching. And once it starts to feel better, we'll ease you back into your normal routine." The diagnosis was a relief, nothing too serious. But Jack was still disappointed. 2 weeks of rest meant that his workouts would be limited. He had worked so hard to build momentum, and now, it felt like everything was coming to a halt. But Jack wasn't one to give up easily. He had faced tough times before, whether it was through his back issues or the ups and downs of his fitness journey. This was just another challenge, and he knew he had the mental strength to push through it. That evening, Jack sat down with his journal and wrote about the injury. He focused not on the frustration, but on how he could use this time to improve in other areas. He realized that this setback was an opportunity in disguise. He could focus on strengthening his core, improving his flexibility, and working on his mental resilience. Day 52. Diagnosed with a rotator cuff strain. 2 weeks of rest and therapy ahead. Frustrated but focused on making the best of the situation. We'll use this time to work on flexibility and core strength. Jack knew that he couldn't rush recovery. His body needed time to heal, and pushing it too hard would only lead to further injury. But he also knew that setbacks didn't have to stop progress entirely. He was determined to continue making small improvements in other areas of his life, even if it meant modifying his routine temporarily. Over the next 2 weeks, Jack followed his doctor's advice. He focused on mobility exercises, core workouts, and stretching. He stayed active without putting strain on his injured shoulder. He also used the time to meditate and journal, reflecting on his journey and what he had learned so far. By the end of the 2 weeks, Jack's shoulder had improved significantly. He was eager to get back into his workouts, but he knew he had to be patient. His recovery wasn't just physical, it was a lesson in resilience, in the understanding that setbacks were a part of life's process, and that true growth came from how he responded to those challenges. It was a rainy Tuesday morning when Jack sat down with his coffee, gazing out the window at the gray skies. His shoulder had been feeling better since his injury, but his progress felt slower than he had hoped. While the physical pain was receding, the mental hurdle was proving to be much harder to overcome. He flipped open his journal, scribbling down his thoughts. "I should be pushing harder by now. I should be back to my old routine, feeling strong and unstoppable. But instead, I feel stuck. Why does it feel like every step forward is followed by 2 steps back?" The questions swirled in his mind as the sound of the rain hitting the window grew louder. The frustration of his injury was still fresh, and though he had made peace with the necessary rest, the mental challenge was a different beast. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he was falling behind, even though logically, he knew he was doing what was best for his recovery. "Mindset is everything," his friend Mark had told him just a few days earlier when they had talked on the phone. Jack remembered the words vividly. "What do you mean by that?" Jack had asked him. Mark had paused before replying. "When things get tough, your mindset is what keeps you moving forward. It's easy to get caught up in setbacks and think they're a sign of failure. But the truth is, you can control your reaction to them. It's all about how you see it. You either let the setback defeat you, or you turn it into an opportunity to learn and grow. Your mindset is the key to that." At the time, Jack hadn't fully understood the depth of what Mark had said. But now, sitting alone with his coffee and his thoughts, it began to click. He realized that the frustration he was feeling was normal. His body had been through a lot, and his mind was struggling to catch up with the physical recovery. This was more than just about his shoulder, it was about his approach to challenges in general. For years, Jack had focused on the immediate result, the quick fixes, the fast-paced progress. He had never fully appreciated the slower, more deliberate nature of real growth. He needed to change how he viewed setbacks and progress. Jack put down his journal and took a deep breath. It's time to shift my perspective, he thought. I've been viewing this injury as an obstacle, but what if I started to see it as an opportunity to build my mental strength? He stood up, a newfound resolve filling him. Jack decided that today, he would take control of his mindset. He had the power to shape how he viewed his recovery, and instead of seeing it as something that was holding him back, he would treat it as part of the journey. That afternoon, Jack sat in front of his computer and began researching ways to strengthen his mindset. He found articles, videos, and podcasts about positive psychology, the importance of resilience, and the science behind mental toughness. He read about athletes who had overcome incredible injuries, not just through physical rehabilitation, but through the power of their mindset. He learned that successful recovery wasn't just about following a physical regimen, it was also about being kind to oneself, accepting the pace of progress, and reframing challenges as growth opportunities. The stories of people who had faced long-term injuries and come out stronger on the other side reminded Jack that setbacks didn't have to be seen as failures, they were simply chapters in a longer story of perseverance. As Jack immersed himself in this new information, he felt a shift within him. The next morning, he woke up with a sense of purpose that he hadn't felt in weeks. His shoulder still wasn't fully recovered, but now, he viewed it as a temporary obstacle, not a permanent roadblock. He knew that his recovery process would take time, and he was ready to embrace that. Day 58. Focused on strengthening my mental resilience. Read about the power of mindset in recovery. Changed my approach, setbacks are opportunities to grow. Started practicing daily affirmations to stay positive. Over the next few days, Jack practiced incorporating small mindset shifts into his daily routine. Every morning, he recited a series of positive affirmations before he even got out of bed. I am capable of overcoming any challenge that comes my way. Each day, I am making progress, no matter how small. I trust the process, and I am patient with myself. My body and mind are strong, and I will continue to improve. It may have seemed like a small change, but Jack began to notice a difference in how he approached the day. Even on days when the rain was relentless, when his shoulder ached a bit more than usual, or when his progress seemed slow, he reminded himself that growth didn't always happen overnight. He could still be successful, even in the face of setbacks. Emma noticed the change too. One day, after their workout, she gave him a knowing smile. You seem different, she said, stretching her arms after their session. More focused, I guess. Like you've really been digging into something lately. Jack chuckled. Yeah, I've been focusing on my mindset. I realize that the physical part of recovery is important, but the mental side is just as crucial. I can't let myself get defeated by setbacks anymore. It's all about staying positive and moving forward, no matter how slowly. Emma nodded approvingly. I love that. You've always been strong, Dad, but it's great to see you strengthen that mental toughness. It's like you've unlocked a whole new level. Jack smiled, feeling a sense of pride. I'm learning, Emma. And I'm grateful to have you by my side. As the weeks went on, Jack continued to work on strengthening his mindset. He took small steps every day, whether it was through journaling, practicing gratitude, or simply acknowledging the progress he was making. His shoulder continued to heal, but now, Jack understood that true growth was about more than just physical recovery. It was about learning how to be resilient, to bounce back from challenges, and to keep moving forward, no matter the pace. The shift in his mindset became the catalyst for further growth. His positive outlook didn't just affect his physical recovery, it improved his relationships, his work, and his overall sense of well-being. Jack realized that the journey wasn't just about the destination, it was about how he approached every moment along the way. It had been nearly 3 months since Jack's shoulder injury, and while his physical strength was steadily returning, something deeper was beginning to stir inside him. Despite all the progress he'd made, a lingering feeling of doubt started to creep in. What if he couldn't return to the level he was at before? What if the setbacks he had endured were signs that he wasn't meant to push his body to such extremes? Jack had always prided himself on being resilient, but now, faced with the final stretch of recovery, he felt a wave of uncertainty. It was a Saturday morning when he first began to feel it. The weather was crisp, the air carrying that autumn chill that signaled the change of seasons. Jack was on his usual morning run, a route he had come to love for its mix of challenge and serenity. But today, the run felt different. His legs felt heavy, his breathing labored. The wind cut through him, and despite his best efforts to push past it, the doubts persisted. Maybe I'm not cut out for this anymore, he thought as he slowed his pace. Maybe it's time to accept that my body has limits. Maybe I should scale back, just enjoy being healthy, without pushing for something more. Jack stopped and leaned against a nearby tree, catching his breath. For a moment, the idea of scaling back seemed tempting, comfortable, even. But deep down, he knew that wasn't who he was. Jack had never been one to settle for the easy path. He'd always believed in striving for something greater, in constantly challenging himself to push past his limits. But was he pushing himself too far? His phone buzzed in his pocket, interrupting his thoughts. It was a message from Emma. "Hey Dad, I've been thinking about our next workout. What if we pushed it a little harder today? Maybe add some weight or do some more intense intervals. What do you think?" The question lingered in Jack's mind. He hadn't felt ready to step up his training yet, not after the injury. But Emma's message gave him pause. Maybe the fear that had taken hold of him was only holding him back. He stood up, wiped his face, and took a deep breath. No, he wasn't going to let fear dictate his journey. It was time for the final push. Day 62. Shoulder fully healed, but a bit of hesitation remained. Feeling strong but questioning whether I'm pushing myself too hard. Decided to increase intensity of workouts, but with caution. That afternoon, Jack met Emma at the gym. She was already warming up when he arrived, and her energy was contagious. "Dad, you look like you're in the zone today," she said, flashing him a grin. Jack smiled back, though the nerves still lingered. "I think I am. It's time to see what I'm really made of." They started their workout with a series of light stretches and mobility drills to ease into the session. But as they moved on to strength training, Jack couldn't help but feel the weight of his own uncertainty. It wasn't the physical exertion that concerned him, it was the mental battle that he was facing. Could he really push himself to that next level without risking another injury? Emma noticed his hesitation. "Dad, you've been doing great. You're strong, and you've worked hard to get here. But you don't have to prove anything to me. Let's take it slow and build up the intensity. You've got this." Her words were like a reset button. Jack realized that this wasn't about proving something to anyone, not even to himself. It was about being honest with where he was in his journey and understanding that pushing his limits didn't mean sacrificing his long-term well-being. He took a deep breath and began his first set of weighted squats. The weight felt challenging, but manageable. As he completed the set, he could feel his muscles firing, his confidence building with each repetition. By the end of the session, Jack had pushed through every set without overextending himself, and for the first time in weeks, he felt a surge of pride. After the workout, Jack and Emma sat down for a quick smoothie. Jack looked at her with a sense of gratitude. "You know, I've been questioning myself a lot lately," he said. "Wondering if I'm trying to push too hard. But today, I felt like I really came back. Like I'm finally in control again." Emma smiled. "You didn't just come back, Dad. You're stronger than ever. I can see it in your eyes." As Jack drove home, he reflected on the day. The doubts he had been carrying were still there, but they no longer controlled him. He had taken a leap of faith, trusting that his body and mind were capable of more than he had given them credit for. Today wasn't about reaching the finish line, it was about taking another step forward. Over the next few days, Jack continued to push himself with renewed confidence, but with a smarter approach. He no longer saw recovery as a limitation, but as part of his growth. He learned to listen to his body and respect its signals, while still maintaining the mindset of someone who was always striving for the next challenge. He also began to notice a deeper shift in his overall perspective. It wasn't just about fitness anymore. It was about resilience, about refusing to be defined by setbacks, about taking on challenges and learning from them. His fitness journey had become a reflection of his life, an ongoing process of growth, of facing fears, and of continuing to show up, no matter what. Day 68. Progressing steadily in strength training. Realize that the true challenge isn't in the workouts, but in the mental resilience required to keep pushing. No more doubts. The next level is within reach. In the weeks that followed, Jack's training intensity gradually increased. But more than the physical improvement, it was the mental transformation that stood out. He was no longer driven by fear or hesitation. Instead, he was driven by a deep belief in himself, a belief that no matter the obstacle, he would find a way to overcome it. By the time his birthday arrived, Jack felt a sense of accomplishment that he hadn't felt in years. He had come full circle, from a man recovering from an injury to someone who had embraced every challenge, learned from it, and come out stronger on the other side. That evening, as he sat down to a quiet dinner with his family, he reflected on everything he had learned. This journey had never been just about building muscle, it had been about building the kind of resilience that allowed him to keep going, no matter the setbacks, no matter the doubts. Jack stood in front of the mirror in his bedroom, taking in the reflection of the man he had become. His muscles were more defined, his posture straighter, and the spark of confidence in his eyes was something he hadn't seen in a long time. It wasn't just the physical changes that had transformed him, it was the way he now viewed himself, the way he carried himself, and the mindset he had adopted. As he turned away from the mirror, Jack felt an overwhelming sense of pride and accomplishment. He had come a long way since that rainy day when his injury first set him back. The road hadn't been easy, but every step, every setback, every victory had led him to this moment. He had learned to see the beauty in the journey, even when it seemed impossible. And most importantly, he had learned that his strength wasn't just measured by the weight he could lift or the miles he could run, it was measured by his ability to keep going, no matter the challenges he faced. The past few months had been transformative, not just for his body, but for his heart and mind. Jack had discovered the power of resilience, the strength of his own mindset, and the importance of taking life one step at a time. And as he looked ahead to the future, he knew that this was only the beginning. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a message from Emma. "Dad, I've been thinking. Maybe we should try something new, something even bigger. What if we ran a half marathon together? I know you've been working hard, and it could be the next challenge we take on. What do you think?" Jack smiled to himself. A half marathon. It had been a long time since he had thought about something like that. The idea was intimidating, but at the same time, exhilarating. It would be the perfect test of everything he had learned, physical endurance, mental toughness, and the power of working through fear and uncertainty. He typed back quickly. "Let's do it. I'm ready." As Jack put his phone down, he couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. This was more than just a race. It was a chance to prove to himself that the journey he had taken wasn't about achieving one final goal, it was about the process of growth and the willingness to embrace new challenges. That evening, he sat down with Emma and Sarah to discuss the race. The idea of training for a half marathon was daunting, but it felt like the perfect next step for him. They talked about training plans, nutrition, and the mental preparation needed for a challenge like this. Jack knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was no longer afraid of the hard work. He was ready for whatever came next. The following weeks were filled with early morning runs, strength training sessions, and recovery days. Jack focused on building up his endurance while maintaining the mental strength that had gotten him this far. Each day was a step closer to the race, and with each passing day, Jack grew more confident in his ability to not just complete the race, but to excel in it. Throughout the process, Emma remained his biggest supporter. They ran together, shared recovery tips, and celebrated small victories along the way. Sarah, too, cheered them on, making sure they stayed on track and encouraged them when the training got tough. Finally, the day of the half marathon arrived. Jack stood at the starting line with Emma by his side, his heart pounding with anticipation. The air was cool, and the atmosphere was electric with the excitement of hundreds of other runners. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down. Jack took a deep breath, remembering how far he had come, the injuries, the setbacks, the doubts, and the triumphs. The starting gun fired, and they were off. For the first few miles, Jack kept a steady pace. His legs felt strong, and his breathing was steady. But as the race wore on, the inevitable fatigue started to set in. His muscles began to ache, and the voices of doubt started creeping in again. What if I can't finish this? He thought. What if this is too much for me? But then, just as quickly, he remembered everything he had learned over the past few months. He remembered the resilience he had built. He remembered the power of his mindset. He remembered how he had kept going even when things seemed impossible. He pushed those thoughts aside and focused on the next step. One foot in front of the other. He didn't need to worry about the finish line just yet, he needed to focus on the journey, on the effort he was putting in right now. Emma stayed by his side, offering encouragement and reminding him of how far they had come. With each mile, Jack's confidence grew. They were in this together, and they would finish together. As they approached the final stretch, Jack felt a surge of energy. The finish line was in sight, and all the doubts, all the fears, all the challenges melted away. He was going to do this. He was going to finish the race. When they crossed the finish line, Jack's heart swelled with pride. It wasn't just about completing a half marathon. It was about everything he had overcome to get there, the physical pain, the mental struggles, and the constant effort to move forward. He hugged Emma tightly. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "We did, Dad." "You did it," she replied, her smile radiating pure joy. That evening, as Jack sat down to a quiet dinner with his family, he reflected on the journey he had taken. This wasn't just a physical challenge, it was a life-changing experience. He had discovered the power of resilience, the importance of mindset, and the strength that came from pushing through his limits. And as he looked ahead, he knew that this was only the beginning. The race had been a milestone, but the true victory was in the person he had become. Jack had learned that life was about more than just achieving goals, it was about the journey, the process of becoming, and the lessons learned along the way. As the evening came to a close, Jack felt a deep sense of peace. His journey wasn't over, but he was no longer afraid of what the future held. He had proven to himself that no matter the obstacles, no matter the setbacks, he had the strength to overcome them. And with that strength, he was ready for whatever came next. Years passed, but the lessons Jack had learned throughout his journey never faded. The physical milestones, completing the half marathon, lifting heavier, training harder, had been significant, of course, but the true transformation went far beyond the physical. Jack had become more than just a man who worked out, more than someone who pushed his limits for the sake of it. He had evolved into someone who understood the delicate balance between strength and vulnerability, persistence and rest, fear and courage. It was a Sunday afternoon when Jack found himself sitting on his porch, enjoying the peaceful rhythm of the world around him. The sounds of nature, the chirping birds, the soft rustling of leaves in the wind, filled the air. He took a deep breath, a contented smile tugging at his lips. Life had found a beautiful rhythm, one he hadn't always been sure would come. He had come a long way from that moment when his injury had cast a shadow over everything he had worked for. It was easy to look back now and see how each step, each challenge, and each moment of doubt had been necessary to reach this point. He had learned that no setback, no matter how big or small, was ever permanent unless he allowed it to be. Every struggle, every moment of pain, had been a teacher in disguise, showing him just how capable he truly was. Emma had grown into a strong, confident woman, someone who had taken her father's lessons to heart and found her own voice along the way. She was now working in fitness coaching, helping others embrace their journey of transformation just as Jack had done for himself. Their bond had only deepened as the years went on, and Jack couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of pride as he watched her live her own life with the same resilience he had nurtured. The family, too, had grown closer. Sarah, Jack's wife, had been there through it all, the highs, the lows, the moments of triumph, and the moments of despair. Her unwavering support, her steady belief in Jack's potential, had been the anchor that kept him grounded. They had built a life together that was filled with love, laughter, and an understanding that the true strength of a family lay in its ability to support and uplift each other. Jack's daily routine had become a blend of work, exercise, and quality time with family. He continued to train, but it was no longer about achieving some ideal of perfection. It was about staying healthy, staying strong, and staying connected to the deeper lessons that had shaped him into who he was today. He had found peace with his body, not by demanding more from it, but by listening to it and respecting its limits. One afternoon, Jack found himself sitting in the park, watching a group of kids play basketball. Their laughter filled the air as they joked and competed with each other. He noticed one young boy, a little smaller than the others, but with a fierce determination in his eyes. Jack couldn't help but smile. It reminded him of his own younger self, the kid who had been told he couldn't, but decided to prove otherwise. He stood up and walked over to the group, approaching the boy who had caught his attention. "Hey there," Jack said, giving the boy a friendly smile. "Mind if I join in for a bit?" The boy looked up at Jack, sizing him up for a moment before nodding. "Sure, old man," he said with a grin. "But don't expect to win." Jack chuckled, feeling a sense of camaraderie with the kid. They played for a while, Jack moving a little slower than he used to, but still enjoying the game. As they took a break, the boy asked him, "So, how'd you get so good?" Jack leaned back on the bench and took a breath. "It's not about being the best, kid," he said. "It's about never giving up. You'll have days when things seem tough, when you think you can't go any further. But if you keep showing up, keep working at it, and don't quit, that's when you find out what you're really made of." The boy looked at Jack, his eyes full of curiosity. "And that's what you did?" Jack nodded, his smile genuine. "That's exactly what I did. And I'll keep doing it, no matter how old I get." As Jack stood up and waved goodbye to the boy, he felt a warmth spread through him. It wasn't the physical achievements that mattered most anymore, it was the ability to inspire others, to pass on the lessons he had learned, and to be a living example of the power of resilience. Back at home, Jack sat down with Emma and Sarah, telling them about his impromptu basketball game. They laughed together, sharing in the lightheartedness of the moment, but Jack knew that it was more than just a fun afternoon. It was a reminder of the way life worked, how, no matter where you were in your journey, there was always someone who could benefit from your experience, from your story. As Jack sat there, surrounded by the people he loved, he realized that the legacy he had built wasn't one of just physical strength, it was one of mental fortitude, determination, and the unwavering belief that with the right mindset, anything was possible. This was his new beginning. A beginning where the journey was just as important as the destination, where every step, every challenge, and every lesson was a part of a larger story. Jack wasn't done yet. In fact, he knew that he would never truly be done. Life would continue to throw challenges his way, and he would continue to face them head-on. But now, he understood that each new challenge wasn't something to fear, it was something to embrace. Jack's story was one of resilience, yes. But more importantly, it was a story of living fully, embracing each moment, and knowing that the strength to overcome anything lay within. And as he looked ahead, Jack felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The road ahead was long, but it was one he was ready to travel, one step at a time. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?